Okay, so I'd like to welcome everybody to tonight's meeting. I'd like to begin the meeting by thanking all of our broadcast partners and our reporters who reported on our meeting. And I'm going to pass it on to the clerk to begin the meeting.
Mr. Mayor and members of council, under agenda item 1, adoption of minutes, a motion by councillors Christian and Gardy resolved that the minutes of the regular council meeting of 2018-12-10 be approved.
All in favor? Carried.
Under agenda item 3, declarations of pecuniary interest.
Councillor Nero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Agenda item 6.4, the Transit Pass Partnership with Algoma University and Sault College. My son-in-law is employed by Sault College. And agenda item 8.5, the resolution regarding Allenside Road and Wallace Terrace truck traffic. My daughter owns a home on Allenside Road.
Thank you, Councillor Nero. Anybody else? Councillor Shoemaker.
I'm just trying to, yes, 289 Bay Street, it's 6.14 license of occupation. The principal of one of the corporation is a client of the law firm at which I work. It's a numbered company.
Yep. So I have a conflict on 6.8 White Oak Drive amendment. That matter was dealt with at our last meeting. I was conflicted there, and I'm just passing at this meeting. The applicant is a client of my law firm. Seeing no additional conflicts, Mr. Clerk?
Additional. Under agenda item 4, approve agenda and addendum is presented. A motion by councillors Christian and Scott. Resolved that the agenda and addendum for the 2019-01-14 City Council meeting as presented be approved.
All in favor? Carried. So before we get into our proclamations and delegations, the CEO wants to introduce a new member of our senior staff.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to council, I'm pleased to announce Karen Fields as the new city solicitor for City of Sault Ste. Marie. Karen's sitting at the spot that's been previously held by Ms. Nuala Kenny and, of course, by Melanie Borowitz-Sivinik, who we want to thank for her acting in this capacity for the time leading up to Karen coming on board. Just as some background for Karen, she has been a partner for the past 15 years at Crawford Shondon Partners LLP in Brampton, Ontario. Prior to that, she was an associate and partner with Matthews Tinsdale and Clark LLP in Toronto, Ontario. Karen's municipal experience includes Provincial Offences Act work in defence and prosecution. She has extensive experience working with regional municipalities and cities regarding employment law, has worked with police services boards, emergency services, transit authorities, and utilities providing advice and representation. Karen has been consistently recognized and included in Best Lawyers in Canada for her work in occupational health and safety law, including the 2018 edition. She has provided seminars and speaking engagements for numerous associations and professional conferences and has a proven record of accomplishment in all levels of court and various tribunals. We're very happy to have her on board, and we would like to say thank you, and we look forward to working with you, Karen.
Thank you. I look forward to working with everyone as well.
So Karen, so when your mic is red, you've got a live mic. There you go. Yeah. So
speak louder, or
yeah.
Thank you very much, and I look forward to working with everyone.
Okay. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you.
Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, under agenda item 5, our first item is the 2018 Christmas Lighting Awards, and Councillor Christian, chair of the Christmas Lighting Awards Committee, is going up to the delegation mic where he'll introduce the awards and hand them out.
Admittedly, I'm used to Councillor Bruni doing this. Yeah. Councillor Christian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On that note, I do want to report that the Lighting Awards Committee was done in record time, and I don't know if it has anything to do with the chair or the committee itself. Perhaps it's both. But we were done in record time. We were done by 9 o'clock, so just saying. The Christmas Lighting Awards program, co-sponsored by PUC, promotes and encourages community involvement and recognizes the efforts of residents who light up their homes and businesses in the spirit of the season. On behalf of the Christmas Lighting Awards Committee, I would like to thank the residents and businesses for the work they put into their displays. I would also like to thank the PUC for their continued support of this program and thank our city transit department who drove us around town to see the beautiful properties. This year we had a total of 30 nominees. The committee that gathered on December the 20th to view the lights included myself, Tina Bastos, Lindsay Marshall, Cindy Pinder, and Natalie Vaudrey-Bertolo. I'm pleased to announce the following residents and businesses that were chosen as winners in 2018 for the Christmas Lighting Awards program. I'll call out their names and I'll ask if you're present to come forward and receive your award. For Award 1, first place goes to the Metallo residents, 95 Indiana Drive. Congratulations. Second place, Franchella residents, 286 Lake Street. Ward 2, first place goes to the Morley residents, 161 Tree Lawn. 100% so far. Congratulations. Second place in Ward 2 goes to Deschamps and Adamson residents, 1240 Queen Street East. Congratulations. All right, in Ward 3, moving right along, first place, Chikello residents, 300 Mill Creek Drive. We'll see to it that she gets her award. Second place goes to the Riso residents, 382 Old Garden River Road. I hope I pronounced that properly. Thanks. All right, Ward 4, Ben Trafato residents, 299 Doncaster. And second place goes to the Booth residents, 27, White Oak Drive.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Ward 5, first place, Lefebvre residents, 1 St. Michael's Square. And last but not least, second place, Merlino residents, 55 Foothill Road.
Congratulations.
Our business winner this year, first place goes to Paint and Decor Concepts, 826 Queen Street East. And again, thank you to everyone. I appreciate the support that we had from our committee and all of those people that participated in the contest. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Christian.
Under Agenda Item 5.2, Alzheimer Awareness Month. Terry Caparossi, Executive Director, is in attendance.
Welcome to council, Terry.
Good evening, Mayor Provenzano, city councilors, community members. I have the privilege of working with an excellent team of dedicated professionals at the Alzheimer Society in Sault Ste. Marie and Algoma District, and in our satellite offices in Wawa and Elliott Lake, who support over 2,800 families and caregivers of those diagnosed with an Alzheimer's disease or related dementias. Dementia is a collective term to describe brain disorders whose symptoms include decline in memory, reasoning and communication skills, and changes in personality and behavior. Alzheimer's Awareness Month is a campaign that aims to end stigma around Alzheimer's disease and related dementias. While awareness about Alzheimer's and dementia has increased, stigma and negative attitudes around it continue to persist. The Alzheimer's Society has released findings of a survey that Canadians acknowledge that people living with dementia regularly experience many forms of stigma, including being ignored or dismissed, being frequently taken advantage of, difficulty accessing appropriate services or supports, being feared or met with distrust or suspicion. More than 228,000 Ontarians currently live with a dementia diagnosis. Last year, 70,000 clients were served across this province by 29 local societies. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you, our mayor, council, and community members for your continued support of the work we do, and remind you that our annual walk, now known as the IG Wealth Management Walk for Alzheimer's, is scheduled for Sunday, January 27th at White Pines, and we look forward to having Councillor Hollingsworth join us this year. Every dollar raised in our community remains here to provide much-needed support and services. Also, thank you to past and present councillors for your continued efforts and support. You have demonstrated what it means to be a true champion for this cause. Your time, energy, and enthusiasm goes a long way in our community to help the Alzheimer's Society and all those affected by this disease to reduce stigma. To tackle stigma, the Alzheimer's Society is letting the experts do the talking, people living with dementia and their care partners. It is my pleasure to introduce Nancy and Blaine Konzik, a caregiver and person living with dementia, to speak about their journey as a couple living with dementia.
Mr. Mayor, council members, members of the public. I'm here this afternoon to share the journey my husband Blaine and I started back in 2011. We had moved back north on retirement in 2000 and settled in Bruce Mines. Our kids were scattered across Canada and in Europe, and we came north to our dream retirement place on the water. Blaine had been VP Finance for Beatrice Foods and a manager of the Beatrice cream cheese plant in his pre-retirement years. And retirement also gave us the opportunity to travel extensively in our RV across North America. Then came the summer when we realized that something was terribly wrong. Blaine, at 67 years of age, lost the ability to find nouns. All of a sudden, we could not have a meaningful conversation. The diagnosis was aphasia, and we turned to a speech therapist for help in communicating. There was no stroke to cause this, which was troubling, so why was this happening? Then he could not remember what he'd done the day before, and our family doctor did some testing, and the diagnosis changed to Alzheimer's disease. 8 years later, we are still coping at home, but with respite assistance from me. Our travel days on long trips became restricted to short overnight or day trips like today. These past 8 years have been a steep learning curve for me, well, and for Blaine too. Blaine is content with whatever the day and time brings. I, on the other hand, have become a caregiver to a person who is changing before my eyes. I expected him to be his usual active, in-charge self that I've loved for over 50 years. Now I had to learn this new role, and I turned to the Alzheimer's Society for help. The First Link coordinator came to our house and told me about the services that were offered and courses that I could attend. And back then, I was able to leave Blaine home to go to a 5-session course in the Sault. Also, there was an afternoon program for persons with memory loss that I took Blaine to. And eventually, he was unable to attend this session since he was suffering separation anxiety when I was not there. But we do both go to the wonderful program Minds in Motions that's offered weekly. There we join other couples traveling the same journey as we learn skills to keep us both healthy and stimulated. We tried the day away programs in the Sault, but I had to drive Blaine there and then hang around in the Sault for the day. This did not work for him because he wanted me there, and it didn't work for me because I was stressed out trying to figure out what to do all day in your city. We could not use the Tree Fry Center day away program in Richards Landing because we were out of its jurisdiction by 1 kilometer. The staff at the Alzheimer's Society came to our rescue and helped pull strings with the Northeast Lynn, and we now both go to the Richards Landing weekly. Blaine has a new group of friends that keep him involved in games, while I volunteer with another group. And you win at dice all the time, don't you? Yes, you do, yes. Caregiver support groups were only held in the Sault, and this didn't work for me again. I could not get reliable respite PSW workers to cover me at home for the 4 hours I needed to get there and back. The staff at the Alzheimer Society worked their magic once more, and now there's a caregiver support in Bruce Mines. The Alzheimer Society staff, including the recreation therapists, come to us and provide useful information and support for a growing number of participants from Thessalon to Echo Bay. I still had a problem getting respite, though. CCAC said that we qualified for 10 hours of respite care a month. That's 10 hours a month. However, the reality turned out to be a stressful situation when the PSWs that were booked to come for a certain time had to cancel or change the timing because of their scheduling conflicts. Living in rural Algoma has its drawbacks getting this care, as the PSWs were being asked to be in 2 places without consideration for driving time. This has been solved by us hiring a private PSW to come to our house for 4 to 5 hours a week. Blaine welcomes her, and now I can leave the house to attend local activities. And with the help of neighbors, I have 7 hours a week to do what I want, not the 10 hours a month that they were promising with CCAC. And it's so freeing for both of us, right? You don't have to put up with me all the time. Yeah, okay. And she's nice, eh? Yes, you like Terry. Through this journey, the staff at the Alzheimer Society has been there for me to support, to educate, and to advocate for me. Our journey will be coming to its inevitable end, but I know that in the difficult years remaining, I can turn to the Alzheimer Society for help. They have become an extended family, and our story is just one of many that the Alzheimer Society in Sault Ste. Marie is supporting. Thank you.
So before I read the proclamation, I'd like to thank you for sharing your story. It's very inspiring and touching. Whereas currently more than 500,000 Canadians have dementia, including Alzheimer's disease. And whereas from now, in less than 15 years, an estimated 937,000 Canadians will have dementia. Whereas for every person with dementia, 1 or more caregivers provide care. And whereas dementia doesn't define a person, they're still the same individual as they were before the diagnosis. Whereas people with dementia can continue the things they love and remain active in their communities with the right help and the right support. And whereas Alzheimer's societies across Canada provide programs and support for people with all forms of dementia along with their caregivers. And whereas the Alzheimer's Society is the leading Canadian funder of dementia research and has invested over $50 million in biomedical and quality of life research through the Alzheimer's Society Research Program. Now therefore, I, Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim the month of January 2019 as National Alzheimer Awareness Month in the City of Sault Ste. Marie, and do urge all of our citizens in our community to become more aware and educated concerning the early signs and symptoms and far-reaching effects of Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Under agenda item 5.3, Crime Stoppers Month, Carmine Biasucci, Chair, and Anita Patsy, Executive Secretary Treasurer, are in attendance.
Welcome to Council.
Thank you for having me. As you can see, Carmen is not with me. He had some work obligations today. Mr. Mayor, councillors, and members of the community. My name is Anita Patsy, and I am the Crime Stoppers Treasurer Executive Secretary. Each year during the month of January, the world promotes, shares, and celebrates the success of Crime Stoppers programs. We wouldn't be successful if it wasn't for the many contributors who make up our team. We are thankful to all our sponsors, donors, and fundraising participants within the community, for without them, our program would cease to exist. We are also thankful to our police partners, the media, and our tipsters for their partnership and their efforts to make Sault Ste. Marie a safer place. I would like to take this opportunity to thank my fellow board of directors, the coordinators, staff, and volunteers for all their work that they have done to better the program. I know that we are all committed to seeing Crime Stoppers grow and become more successful, and I am honored to be the leader of this team. Thank you, Mayor Provenzano, councillors, and the City of Sault Ste. Marie for proclaiming January as Crime Stoppers Month and continuing to support our local Crime Stoppers program.
Thank you. Whereas each year during the month of January, the world promotes, shares, and celebrates the success of Crime Stopper programs. Canada's theme for 2019 is Say It Here, encouraging programs to educate and bring awareness to criminal activity both proactively and reactively. The City of Sault Ste. Marie supports Crime Stoppers of Sault Ste. Marie and Algoma District by proclaiming January as Crime Stoppers Month. And whereas last year alone, Crime Stoppers locally was responsible for 79 arrests, 201 charges laid, 87 cases cleared, $14,000 in drugs seized, $15,200 in recovered property, and 7 weapons seized. Crime Stoppers continues to be a success due to all the tipsters who enter into the anonymous program, the police partnerships, the media partnerships, the volunteers, the staff, and all the individuals and businesses who donate to help make our city a safer place. Now therefore, I, Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim January 2019 as Crime Stoppers Month and congratulate Crime Stoppers of Sault Ste. Marie and District of Algoma for 34 years of success in our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, this brings us to agenda item 5.4, 2019 preliminary budget. The CAO, the CFO treasurer, and the manager of audits and capital planning will each be given a presentation concerning the budget.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, to council and to the community at large. The budget documents that have been tabled with you today at this council meeting represent what it would cost in 2019 to undertake the same services that were conducted in 2018. It is being provided here as information. The actual deliberations of the budget will be on February 4th. We nonetheless encourage councillors to ask questions of staff between now and that time by directing them through CFO Shell, and we will get back to you as fast as we can in terms of any of the questions as well as the answers, and it will be copy all of City Council when we do that. The CFO is going to be speaking to the actual process, but before I pass it over to her, I do want to make it clear that there are a couple of risks within this budget. One of the particular ones is the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund, OMPF funding, which we're assuming, and we feel it's appropriate and proper to assume it would be maintained as whole for 2019. If that changes, we would have to come back to council to discuss what options are for that or any other of the risks that are inherent in this document that's been provided and tabled to you for you today for your consideration. And with that, I'll pass it over to the CFO to take you through the presentation of the process in the high-level numbers.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. The 2019 preliminary operating and capital budgets are being tabled tonight. The 2019 budget continues to build on communicating the relationship between the services the city provides and the cost and value to the community. Tonight we have the city's corporate communication officer, Tessa Vecchio, and she has a brief video to show what is part of the budget communications for 2019.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The City of Sault Ste. Marie provides a number of municipal services to our residents. This short video was created to highlight just some of the quality services that our tax dollars go towards and to remind us all of the value of these services provide to our community. In addition, for those that follow us on social media, we've launched a That's Quality campaign highlighting some of the quality services that our tax dollars go towards. For example, last week we highlighted Public Works, responsible for maintaining 1,225 lane kilometers of roadways in the winter. During a winter storm event like what we had last Monday, sometimes those roads get maintained multiple times throughout the day. So when you really think about it, it was quite remarkable what they were able to accomplish. This year, we have also encouraged citizens to get involved in a number of ways. The online budget tool enabled taxpayers to identify areas where they would like to see tax dollars utilized. On Wednesday, that's this Wednesday, January 16th, from 4:30 to 5:30 in the Russ Ramsey Room at the Civic Center, we will be hosting a public open house budget session to discuss and answer questions from the public on a one-to-one basis. Residents can continue to provide us feedback through Facebook and Twitter using the handle @CitySSM or hashtag SueBudget. Comments can be made to budgetinput@cityssm.on.ca through email, or alternatively, you can call the Finance Department, 759-5350, or mail us any suggestions. All ideas that are gathered through this process will help in the development of the budget. There's really a lot of great work and quality services that are provided in our community, and we hope that this video gives you a small glimpse as to what those initiatives are.
Thank you, Tessa. As you saw from the video, the city provides a vast array of municipal services. These services are overseen by various departments, ranging from recreational services to the construction and maintenance of roads. The budget presentations tonight are to provide a high-level overview. The detailed budget information is provided on tonight's agenda, as well as will be provided on the city's website subsequent to tonight's meeting. I apologize for the size of this slide. I thought it was a little larger. The economic conditions of Sault Ste. Marie provide insight into the city's ability to generate revenue relative to the demand for public services. They influence service affordability, as well as the competitiveness to attract future growth opportunities to the community. The Conference Board of Canada reports that Sault Ste. Marie has struggled over the last several years. The restructuring of the steel mill dampened private sector investment. The manufacturing sector has been struggling for over a decade, with the sector contracting for 5 consecutive years between 2012 and 2016. The construction sector output declined by an annual 2% between 2011 and 2016, with the weak business and consumer confidence. The exit of the steel mill from CCAA on November 30th, 2018, and the improving steel industry provides optimism for future local economic growth and investment. New reports for the economic outlook for Ontario are suggesting a slowdown in 2019 with weaker housing market and more cautious consumer spending. So this does provide a caution to that optimism. The city has long been considered a one-industry town, as steelmaking continues to be the driving force in the local economy. The cyclical nature of the steel business and other economic events in the industry have significant impacts locally. Diversification of the city's economy is important to provide growth and sustainability. The development of future SSM was to provide the financial and human resources to support the community plan, which addresses these challenges. The municipal tax burden for Sault Ste. Marie and its northern comparators from the BMA study for 2018 is graphically presented. This comparison ensures that the city is not burdening the residents beyond what they can pay or what is the norm in the province. The 2018 study results are consistent with previous years in that Sault Ste. Marie has the lowest tax burden amongst our northern comparators. The 2018 BMA study is available on the city's website and provides a multitude of statistics and comparisons of Ontario municipalities. Affordability, as well as the local economic conditions, provide a general guideline as to what is a reasonable municipal tax increase for the budget year. CPI as an inflation indicator becomes problematic because a municipality's actual experience with inflation can differ greatly from CPI. CPI measures the price change for common household purchases and focuses on expenditures for food, shelter, clothing, and household operations. A municipality's largest expenditures are typically labor, materials, and contractual services, which are different from those found in CPI. On average, the municipal tax levy is approximately 1.7% over CPI. With a CPI estimate of 2.2%, this would translate to a levy increase of 3.9%. With very low assessment growth, estimated at 0.2%, but a positive economic outlook and low municipal tax burden, a range of plus or minus 0.5% or somewhere between 3.2 and 4.2% could be used as a guideline. These metrics, again, are just to provide council some guidelines as they deliberate the 2019 budget. The City of Sault Ste. Marie provides a vast array of municipal services to approximately 73,500 citizens and 34,590 households. Property taxes pay for the numerous programs and services that keep the city running and benefit the community as a whole. The cost of providing these services is over $125 million. About 52% of the cost comes from property taxes. Some of the services provided by the city are optional, others are mandated by legislation in the province. In 2019, staff will be developing a service level inventory on which future budgets will be built. The municipal reference model will be used to develop a service profile which provides a detailed inventory of services, their value, how they are delivered, and the level to which they are delivered. Benchmarking and performance measures will also be included to help assess efficiency and effectiveness, as well as how the city compares to similar municipalities. One of the objectives of the level of service analysis is to help find a balance between the expected level of service, the cost of providing that level of service, and what stakeholders and citizens are willing to pay. Some of the benefits of the analysis include providing a foundation for service improvement, assisting in strategic planning and development of master plans, and moving towards budget development processes that are geared to service level priorities. A report from the CAO will be on the January 28th Council agenda and will provide further details on this project. The total municipal levy increase from 2018 is 3.57%. Maintaining city services represents 2.5%. The detail of this change will be discussed on a subsequent slide. The Ontario Municipal Partnership Grant for 2019 is currently estimated to be equal to the 2018 level of $15.5 million. The province provided correspondence on December 21st, 2018, indicating that allocation notices have been delayed. The implications of this will be discussed later in the presentation. Levy and local boards are 1.07%, or 1/3 of the levy increase. This graph shows the different expenditures by area. You'll see of the total municipal expenses, approximately 1/3 is comprised of costs relating to levy boards, local boards, and outside agencies, but they are also 43% of the total municipal levy. Included in the local board and outside agency category is the Police Services Board, which accounts for 80% of that expense item. Year over year, levy and local board net costs have increased 2.45%. The executive management team will be presenting their budgets on February 4th, and they'll show both operating and key capital investments. And they'll be providing council the opportunity to review and discuss each area at that time. Maintaining services for city departments reflects a net cost of $2.8 million for 2019. The waste management increase of $575,000 includes the addition of $165,000 annually for the mechanical curbside collection carts, as approved by Council on July 16, 2018. The remainder of the impact relates to decreased recycling revenue and commercial tonnage revenue. Commercial tipping fees have been on the decline for several years and have impacted the waste management tipping fee revenue significantly. The 2013 budget reflected tipping fee revenue of $2.3 million. In 2019, it is $1 million. Recycling revenue was reduced by $150,000 from 2018, going to $50,000 in 2019. Market factors are attributable to this decrease. Employee benefits increased by $668,500. Retiree benefits are included in that, and they increased by $150,000. Actual costs have increased significantly since 2013, with more retirees and higher benefit costs. The remainder of the increase, approximately one half for statutory benefits and one half for extended health benefits, and that is due substantially to rate changes. The net change for the council composition, decreasing from 12 councillors to 10, is $54,900 in savings. WSIB continues to show a trend greater than budget, with fire services, PTSD, and presumptive cancer care costs. The $200,000 increase for 2019 is in addition to $300,000 added in 2017 for fire and $150,000 for police. All other areas do not reflect material increases in WSIB trends. Contractual increases reflect contracts approved for materials, services, and fuel, utility, and energy costs as estimated. Corporate insurance was put out for proposal, and in 2018, the results reflected a net savings of $311,200. This is now reflected in the 2019 budget. User fees and other revenue increases reduce the levy by $412,500, and they help to offset increases in the various service areas. The capital from current was reduced by $500,000 in 2016 budget, with the understanding that it would increase by $175,000 annually until the original level of $1.1 million was achieved in 2019. The 2018 budget only reflected an increase of $63,000, so the 2019 budget reflects the balance to reach that original level. The city has limited resources for capital requirements, as you will see in the capital budget presentation. A reduction in the amount reflected will require reducing the recommended capital priorities for 2019. City services by expense category are reflected in this graph. As a service organization, salaries and benefits comprise almost half of the city services portion of the budget. Compensation is governed by contractual agreements, and thus rates of pay are not controllable by the departments. All union contracts are expired for 2019, and rates of pay are reflected at the contractual rate of the last contract. The employee complement is based upon the approved level confirmed by Human Resources, and manning levels are based upon the current service level requirements. There are several items that pose challenges to the city's budgetary requirements. Low assessment growth has been an ongoing challenge for Sault Ste. Marie. Municipal revenue growth for 2018 is only estimated at 0.2%, as compared to 0.78% in 2017. Since 2001, municipal revenue growth has exceeded 1% only 3 times, the most recent which were in 2012 and 2013. As the cost to provide services to residents continues to increase, there is increased pressure to provide services at the same level without a greater than inflation property tax increase. Currently, increases to service costs far exceed the assessment growth revenue that would offset it, resulting in a higher levy increase. As was mentioned by the CAO, the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund allocations is a big unknown. Sault Ste. Marie received $15.5 million in 2018 for OMPF funding. The 2019 allocations have not been announced, and many municipalities are concerned about the funding cuts as it was communicated by the province in late December. If allocations are reduced, councils will need to compensate with property tax increases or local service reductions in 2019. As the reduction is unknown, it makes it difficult to make accurate 2019 spending decisions. Included in tonight's agenda is correspondence from the mayor to the province, as well as a release from AMO, which provides further insight. Staff will keep council apprised as more information becomes available and potential budget impacts and timing. Along with assessment growth challenges, this funding cut would also increase pressure on the ability to provide municipal services without above-inflation property tax increases. One of the reasons the service level inventory project I spoke of earlier in the presentation was initiated was to address these challenges, which have current and future year impacts. Changes to legislation have significant impacts on how we provide services. Staff review these changes and the service impacts, which will reflect in budgetary changes, both positive and negative. WSIB changes from previous years are still impacting the budget. As previously discussed, $200,000 was added in the 2019 in addition to previous increases. Bill 151, Waste-Free Ontario Act, has the potential of having a major impact on solid waste management. The transition timing is unknown and also the potential impact. As details become available, staff will update council on the implications. The provincial governments repealed a substantial number of amendments the previous government put in place with Bill 148. Some have resulted in reducing budgetary pressure, so there is some positives to legislation. Staff continue to assess legislative changes and the impacts, both short-term and long-term. So, next steps for the budget. The budget deliberation meetings for the capital and operating are scheduled for February 4th and 5th, and the 5th is if it's required. At this meeting, the service departments will present their budgets, including additional detail on their capital and operating requests. The operating increase requests, also known as supplementary budget items, will be reviewed by council and, if approved, will be included in the final budget from which staff operates. Staff are anticipating that the province will release the OMPF allocation notices soon, realizing the significant budget implications that will ensue. Implications and recommendations by staff will be provided at the deliberation meeting. Tax rates are set between mid-March and early April. The tax rates set out how the levy increase will be allocated amongst the various property classes. The long-term tax policy, as approved by Council in 2016, forms the basis for staff's recommended options. In closing, I would like to remind everybody, as Tessa did also, of the budget input session scheduled for Wednesday, January 16th, that's this Wednesday, from 4:30 to 5:30 in the Russ Ramsey Room at the Civic Centre. Staff and council representatives will be able to discuss and receive input on city service priorities. So that is the end for the operating budget. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Jake Bruises, and he's going to go and provide a summary of the capital budget.
So attached to your agenda package, you're going to find scheduled detail in the 2019 preliminary capital budget. This short presentation highlights some of the major capital items proposed for 2019. The 2019 capital budget is seeking approval of $57.5 million worth of investment. Over 80% of this is towards roads, storm, and sanitary sewers. Major sanitary projects over the next 3 years include the addition of a biosolids management facility, West End treatment plant, and pump station upgrades. In the current year, just over $4 million is allocated towards transit fleet and equipment, of which up to 73% of that is to be funded through Public Transit Infrastructure Fund, or PTIF. New this year, as per Council's strategic direction, funding is being recommended to be allocated towards growth projects for 2019. The total proposed investment for these growth projects is over $600,000. The $22 million in proposed sanitary sewer projects is 100% funded through sanitary sewer revenue. Over 50% of the road construction program is funded through grants, with the largest grant this year being federal gas tax. These grants are leveraged through city capital funds. In addition, $3 million in grant funding is anticipated from the PTIF fund for transit. The carryover funding you see here for the city was a result of deferred road projects in 2018, those being Bay Street and Black Road connecting link. Reserve and reserve monies are allocated to certain projects in accordance with availability and the city's reserve and reserve fund policy. This slide here summarizes the results of the staff capital prioritization process that was first implemented during last year's capital program. As you can see, the 2019 capital roadworks and transit fleet and equipment ranked at the top of the list, with both projects being heavily funded through grants. As mentioned in the previous slide, new for 2019 was the addition of a separate ranking for growth projects as per council's recommendation. $500,000 of city money is recommended to be allocated to the growth projects identified, with the largest one this year being the Downtown Action Plan. Now, that being said, the city's available capital budget funding is not sufficient to cover all of the recommended projects. The slide here highlights $1.1 million worth of the recommended projects being unfunded. Based on the capital plan as currently presented, the Bond Marina Dock Replacement Project, pedestrian crossovers, and the traffic projects would not be completed in 2019 due to lack of funding. Transit PTIF projects would also have to be clawed back. In your agenda package, you'll find a schedule that details the risks of not completing each of the capital projects submitted for 2019. During budget deliberations, council may choose to shift funding from one capital project to another. This slide highlights the proposed 2019 road construction program. As you'll see on here, B Street has been added back. This was a road that was deferred last year due to pending the results of a traffic study NDA. Black Road widening is another project that was deferred in prior years, and very hopeful upon receiving the Connecting Link funding for this year. Just to highlight the Aqueduct project, that's 2/3 funded through a large grant through the BCF, Build Canada Fund. And as mentioned previously, a major one this year is the PTIF funding that we were to receive. Transit, that's been indicated before that the City Transit Services has one of the oldest fleets around. With this funding, the city will be able to modernize the fleet in due time, which in turn should help to reduce repair and maintenance operating costs for the department. In addition, the recently completed transit operations study identified several key areas of improvement for transit services, including the Northern Transfer Point, which is projected to be completed in 2019. This final slide is just a summary of the 2020 to 2023 capital forecast. You'll see again that the significant sanitary sewer projects are expected to continue to the end of 2021. At that time, where any remaining sewer revenue will be nearly depleted. Again, details of these future capital projects are included in your agenda package. This concludes the 2019 preliminary capital budget presentation.
Mr. Clerk?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, as advised, this was a tabling of this information, so there'll be no questions or discussion on it at tonight's meeting. That will take place at the budget deliberation meeting. We will now go into the regular agenda for 7.1.1, retail sale of cannabis. We do have some people in the gallery regarding that item. I'd also wish to note, council, you have a printout of a letter from the drug strategy group on your desk. So that, it's a report of the CAO that's attached for the consideration of council, and a motion by councillors Hollingsworth and Scott. Resolved that the report of the Chief Administrative Officer concerning retail sale of cannabis be received, and that City Council not opt out of provincially licensed cannabis retail stores in Sault Ste. Marie, and that city staff provide the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario with a copy of the preferred Sault Ste. Marie requirements map, and further that city staff comment on all proposed store locations in the community and advise the AGCO of 1, whether the proposed location is properly zoned for a retail cannabis store, and 2, if the proposed location is within 150 meters of a school, park, community center, or existing treatment facility.
Before we proceed, Council, I did want to recognize Desiree Beck and Allison McFarland. They're the co-chairs of the Sault Ste. Marine Area Drug Strategy Committee. They're here in the audience tonight. I had asked them if they had any feedback, and they put a letter together, which is in your packages, so you have the benefit of that. They are also here in the event that they're called upon. So, Council, you have a lot of information in front of you. I think staff did a good job in preparing that information, and we'll take any questions you might have on it. Seeing none, are we calling a vote on that? Okay.
Unless there's comment, Mr. Mayor.
Does anybody want any comment on it? All in favor? Mr. Garrett, are you voting? Opposed? Okay, carried. So the second motion, Mr. Clerk?
The second item is 7.1.2, regulating consumption of cannabis in municipalities. The report of the Assistant City Solicitor, Senior Litigation Counsel is attached for the consideration of Council, and a motion by Councillors Christian and Scott. Resolved that the report of the Assistant City Solicitor, Senior Litigation Counsel concerning regulating the consumption of cannabis in municipalities be received, and that City Council direct the Legal Department to amend City Bylaw 2003-7 to A, add cannabis and electronic cigarettes to same, so as to treat the consumption of cannabis and use of electronic cigarettes in the same manner as tobacco, and B, add a provision that prohibits the smoking or other consumption of tobacco and cannabis and the use of electronic cigarettes in any public park within the City of Sault Ste. Marie, subject to an exemption for any special events as approved by City Council.
Okay, Councillor Shoemaker, on that motion.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I spoke to my ward mate about this earlier, and we're hoping to move an amendment to add the John Roswell Hub Trail to the no smoking bylaw that the City of Sault Ste. Marie has.
Okay, so there you have a motion on that, an amending motion, and Councillor Hilsinger seconds that. Did you have that written out, Councillor Shoemaker?
I just jotted a brief amendment down.
So we'll have the clerk read that.
So, Council, this would be a motion by Councillor Shoemaker and Hilsinger, amending the main motion by adding the clause, further be it resolved that the John Roswell Hub Trail be added to the Sault Ste. Marie smoke-free bylaw.
As to exclude the hub trail as a place that you can smoke.
Correct.
Okay. Just so everybody's clear on the intent of it. Any discussion on that motion? This is a motion to amend the main motion, so that's all we're talking about right now. All in favor? Carried. So the main motion's amended. Staff understands the direction to include the hub trail in the bylaw. Now we're back to the main motion. Any discussion on the main motion? Councillor Hollingsworth.
I just have a question for clarification. I'm not sure if I direct it to the CAO, but through you, Mayor, to maybe I'll start with Al. Just for clarification, I think it's good, obviously, that schools and certain areas are going to be omitted, which we just talked about. How about marinas? I know that people can't smoke on their boat, but if the boat is parked, let's say at the Pine Street Marina, and people are just, sitting on their boats for the summer afternoon, are they able to enjoy basically the marijuana? And just curious, that's all.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, I'll pass that along to Ms. Melanie Borowitz-Sibinick to respond.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth. The marina itself, if an individual, the way the legislation works right now, if a person is within a boat, they are, whether or not it's moving, they are not permitted to consume cannabis. However, it's a matter of calculating the distances between tented areas, as we have in our bylaw, the Roberta Bondar Pavilion, which is close in proximity to the marina itself, so we would have to actually measure that distance. It may be covered within the smoking bylaw prohibition. Otherwise, under provincial legislation, it would not be covered, and individuals outside in the outdoor public space would be permitted to consume cannabis.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gardy.
Mr. Mayor, through you to either the CAO or the Deputy Solicitor. Right now, as this is written and what we're voting on, if someone wanted to walk down Queen Street smoking a joint, they'd be allowed to, correct?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Gardy, correct. On sidewalks, the smoking of tobacco or cannabis is permitted.
And currently, if someone wanted to walk down Queen Street, Mr. Mayor, through you to Mr. Sibinick, drinking a beer, would they be permitted to?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Gardy, no, that would not be permitted.
Thanks.
Okay, any other questions for the city solicitor or the CAO? Looks like we're ready to vote on this motion. All in favor? As amended, the motion's carried. Opposed? One opposed. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, that brings us to the consent portion of the agenda.
Council, we are on consent. Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is with respect to the letter from the Minister of Finance to you, Mr.
Sure.
Mayor. We got this letter December 21st. That's over 3 weeks now. Have we had any correspondence back on an estimated timeline of when they might get us some OMPF information?
I've not received a response to my correspondence, and I've asked staff, and they can correct me if it's changed since I've asked them, if they've received any indication of when they'll get that back. As of late last week, they hadn't. The treasurer is shaking her head, so I assume that today it remains the case. So we have not had a response.
Okay. And through you to the CAO or the CFO, I mean, I personally, anyways, would find it almost impossible to make a budget decision without a firm number from the OMPF or an indication of what that number is going to be. So what if we don't have it by February 4th?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, we would come back to council. We'd still say it's whole. Our feeling is that the discussion around the OMPF to date, even including the letter, says going back to first principles, which is going to support northern communities. So that's where we're taking it to mean whole, regardless of whether there's going to be change to it or not. But if it is that there is a shift and it's a significant one, we would recommend that we still go forward with the budget. If we don't find out about that shift until somewhere past February 4th, we'd come back to council and give some options as to how we would address that if it indeed came to fruition.
I think from my perspective, Councillor Shoemaker, we would still proceed. If council as a whole did not want to vote in the budget, that would be your decision, but we're going to proceed in the timeline that we've set out. So we'll be here to deliberate on those days. We'll know what our budget is. What we won't know is if there's any additional impact from an OMPF cut. And if council's not willing to make its final budgetary decisions without that knowledge, then council will make that decision at those budget meetings and direct us accordingly.
Right.
But from our perspective, we're going to continue.
Okay. I mean, it's a material difference, right? Depending on the change in the OMPF. So I guess it remains to be seen. That's all on that matter.
Anybody else on that matter? Councillor Shoemaker?
Yes, I'm just trying to pull up which other matters it is.
We'll go to Councillor Christian then if you're looking there. Councillor Christian?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have one question. It relates to 6.4, the Transit Pass Partnership.
Sure.
Perhaps I can direct this question to Mr. Lamming.
Mr. Lamming is here.
I'm looking over the proposal of pilot, and I just want to be clear if there's going to be any route adjustments for this pilot project, or is it simply just a partnership with the two post-secondary institutions for pricing?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, no road adjustments due to this partnership. As you stated, it is with directly, potentially Sault College and Algoma University. Oh. No road adjustments.
Okay. And how will we measure the success of the project in your mind at least? Is it hitting those numbers? Is it going to be driven by finances?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, we're going to take a number of factors into consideration. One of them will be increase in ridership from students that may not be using transit right now, overall ridership in general, and the specific routes that service those routes to Sault College and Algoma University.
Okay. That's all I have today, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Before we proceed any further, the Assistant City Solicitor has pointed out to me, unbeknownst to me, my firm acts on one of the parties in 6.12, so I would have a conflict on that. I should spend more time at my law firm, evidently, but I thank her for pointing that out to me so we can record it for the record. Thank you. Okay, so we'll go back to Councillor, oh, sir, on that matter, Councillor Gardy, yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, through you to Mr. Laming, I was wondering if there was any discussion with any of the Catholic or Public School Board in regards to the same type of system that you're exploring with Algoma University and Sault College.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy, the thought process, we've been in discussion for the past 20 years on how to increase ridership at both the college and university. So this was a first step to move forward with them. This has been a successful pilot in the city of Sudbury. I've spoken personally with the manager of transit there. It's been received very positive, and they're looking at expanding their program to other places as well. So our first thought would be to engage the post-secondary and then have discussions with our Catholic and public school systems if deemed successful here.
Cool. And one more question, if I could. Just because you alluded to increasing, ridership, I know a number of communities in Southern Ontario, particularly, have some discounted rates in and around events going on in the downtown, including hockey games and concerts. Is that a common practice here in town, or is it anything that anybody has put their mind to at all?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy, there's been no specific discussion on discounted rates for special events. It is something that we could look into in the future and take away as a discussion.
Thank you.
Okay, on 6.4, Councillor Vezo-Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Laming. I noticed in the report that in Guelph, it's a required fee for students. It's not an option. So with the proposal going through to Algoma University and Sault College, is it going to be a required fee, or can students opt out?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezo-Allen, this would be a proposal to the student associations. There's one student association at Sault College and two at Algoma University, so they'd have to bring it to their associations, vote on it. So it would be part of their student fee. How this would be monitored would be utilizing their existing student cards with expiry date, and that's how we would track that as they're coming off and on the bus. So it's on a scale basis, to answer your question.
So it hasn't been determined yet?
On an opt-out clause?
Correct.
No, at this point, it's based on going to the student associations, educating them on what the Universal Pass program is, providing full access to everyone, and then they'd be doing a vote at each institution.
Thank you.
Councillor Bruni.
On the same line, was this going to be included in their registration when they pay their tuition fees? And I guess Mr. Laming answered the question. Thanks.
Councillor Hollingsworth in the same matter.
Just a simple question. Can you, Mr. Laming, through you, Mayor, can you define Google Bus orientation?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, yes, we're reaching out and we're actually going to be on site at Sault College and Algoma University. It utilizes the Google technology where you go in and you put a point of origin and destination, and it tracks what buses are available and the time frame to get from point A to point B.
Thank you.
Anybody else in 6.4? Seeing none, Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 6.3, outstanding resolutions.
Yep, go ahead.
The top of page 2, ride-sharing services. This was introduced 26th of September 2016. It's one of the issues that is frequently brought up by residents. So I'm wondering if we can somehow put a return date on this, as it's been it's been about 2.5 years since we asked for this ride sharing bylaw.
Yeah, so we've had specific discussions about that internally, Councillor Shoemaker, and We have a new city solicitor now, and that was in the legal department. And so we had a specific discussion, her and I, last week about some of the outstanding resolutions from the legal department. And she asked for a bit of time to go through them and put some timelines on them. So that's being done now.
Okay.
Specifically, that was one that we specifically all looked at as something that should be back much sooner rather than later.
Yes, that would be
So
helpful.
if you want to put a timeline on it, she'll have to adhere to that, but this is her first full week, and, I did in my meeting with her, tell her I thought council would be friendly to giving her the time to look at all of them and put some own timelines on it herself, so.
I won't make a liar of you, but I am anxious to see this one come back.
Yeah, as I am too, yeah. On the same matter, go ahead, Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, through you, Mayor, to probably City Clerk, Mr. Malcolm. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm just looking at the outstanding again in council resolutions. A meeting date, I think I'm reading it correct, November of 2012, with regards to the film and television production report, film, television production in Sault Ste. Marie. Mr. Sheehan and Mr. Turkle, I think, were the movers. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're already diving into film production, are we not? And hence, can we not remove that now?
I feel like there's a number we could remove, but I didn't produce the list. Mr. Clerk?
That brings me to my second question, but
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, yes, there are some that were, especially it's problematic with outside agencies when council asks them to report back on something. That is one, as well as the next three, or the next two on it that we want to have a discussion with the EDC on, and see if we can either get them off or if there's any information that they can pass along to us.
Okay.
The one specifically that you're asking about, that one was being worked on by the EDC and had been passed around through city staff a number of times over the intervening years. There was a bit of an impasse with city staff and the EDC as how a policy would be implemented and who would carry it out.
Okay.
So that there was a barrier to that one being completed.
okay. So can I make an assumption that maybe in a short period of time, this will be edited and maybe a new copy will be given to us?
For the next quarter.
Okay.
Yes.
Fair.
Okay, Councillor Nero, same matter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, same matter. Question for Mr. Ver, and this is on a resolution that's listed on page 6. The property standards and yard maintenance resolution moved by myself and Councilor Bruni. The due date is Q2 of this year, and I just thought that one is a little late based on the fact that most of this resolution is based on issues that happened during the summer that are most prominent in the summer. And I would have thought that we might have been able to get this back first quarter. Seeing as that it has been in the forefront, we did have a couple, well, at least one meeting on this. And my other problem, I guess, with this coming back so late is that in the 2019 budget, there's a supplementary request for a bylaw enforcement officer, which I would think would be tied to this report, reporting back on this resolution. So maybe, Mr. Ver, and first let me apologize. I didn't get a chance to contact you today on this, but if you could comment on the possibility of maybe getting this resolution, this report back sooner than Q2?
So, Mr. Vera's mic, please. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero, I will take that away and talk to the building staff as well. We're going to be interfacing with our colleagues in legal and see if we can't return that sooner to council.
Yeah. Especially the one that I want to reinforce is that supplementary request for the bylaw enforcement officer. It's pretty hard to talk about that one during budget deliberations if we don't have the background of this report with it.
So the practical ask then, Mr. Vera, so you're clear, is to return it by the next meeting, which is the last meeting between now and our budget deliberations.
Right.
So I'm not sure if you're in a position to do that, but if you are, that's the request.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Nero, understood the request, and we'll do what we can to see if we can bring that back for the next meeting.
That's all I can ask.
Okay. Anybody else on 6.4? Seeing none, we can move on. Is that the extent of your matters, Councilor Shoemaker? Go ahead.
6.10, the Northern Avenue EA.
Okay.
This has to do with the very often heard request for a light at the corner of Pine Street and Pleasant. The recommendation is not to put that in, but rather to extend a street at the end of Northern where the long-term care facility is. Mr. Elliott, I see in your report that you've got the construction of, or the opening of that unopened road allowance slated for 2022. What would be the possibility, or what would be the process to move that up to, say, 2020 or 2021?
Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Shoemaker, it can be moved. It's a small project that can be bumped up. I put it in there assuming that the environmental assessment would come in so that we would be doing this project at some point in the future. And the way we do our 5-year capital plan, we just sort of put projects in that we know, we assume will be priorities, and that was probably the best financial fit for it. But it's possible that we can move it up.
Okay, and would you need council direction to do that, or you can?
Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Shoemaker, of course, if council so directed, you can choose to do it in a future. I wouldn't suggest this year. It's too late to plan for it this year, but if council so chooses, we can blend it into the 2020 Capital Works plan.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else on 6.10? On 6.10, Councilor Gardy, go ahead.
Please. Mr. Mayor, through you to Mr. Elliott, it may not deal particularly with the environmental assessment, so I'm sure Mr. Mayor will see to cutting me short if he deems it not fit to ask the question. But I had noticed that some of the plans moving forward over the course of the next year or two involve pedestrian crossovers in the community. I was wondering if, as part of the plans for Northern Avenue, would the Sault College and the parking lot that is just north of it, would the volume of people crossing the street at Northern Avenue in that intersection, would it warrant one of those pedestrian crossovers or not?
Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Gardy, it may. We have to check the warrants. We have several other intersections or locations in the city where we think they are indeed warranted or very close to being warranted. It's one area that can be looked at. We would probably look at that under the Northern Avenue project itself.
Right.
Northern Avenue project would be primarily a resurfacing project in the next few years. But we would convert it from 4 lanes to 3 in accordance with the EA. And if it's warranted that a pedestrian crossover be put there at Sault College, then that's something we would do at that time.
Okay, thanks. Okay, anybody else in 6.10? Councilor Dufour.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Elliott. Are we, with the Northern Avenue EA, I believe there are 3 components to the construction. Is it more advantageous to do all 3 components all at once, or is there an option to do each component as a separate item in the capital budget?
Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Dufour, there's really 2 projects. The first one, extending Northern Avenue down to Black Road, was not recommended. So there's really 2 projects. The one small 2-block road down into the Pea Patch, and the other is the resurfacing of Northern Avenue. Because Northern Avenue doesn't need resurfacing east of Pine Street, then I would suggest that both the projects could be separated.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Nero, on the same matter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Elliott, on the 3-laning part of the EA North Street between North Street and Pine Street. Do you, in the next couple of years, do you see any possibility of property acquisition to include the right turn lane onto Great Northern Road from Northern Avenue?
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero, it would be desirable to have right turn lane in both the eastbound and the westbound direction. It would really help that intersection. So we're looking at any potential property possibility there, yes.
So for the, specifically for the question that I asked, there's only one property owner involved, correct? And I don't know, have discussions at all been had around that property?
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Nero, I'm aware of some potential discussions with, for the eastbound right turn lane, but nothing so far for the, I'm sorry, for the westbound lane. Going west to make a right turn north on Great Northern Road. At the other leg coming eastbound, we haven't had any discussions yet, no. It's very, very tight there.
Yeah, that's the reason I asked. Okay, thank you.
Okay, anybody else on 6.10? Seeing none, anybody else on the consent agenda? Councillor Vezo-Allen.
Through to you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Ver, actually. So this is on 6.3. The public art policy from August 2015. Since future Sault Ste. Marie has a cultural plan that is going to be taking place, I would certainly assume that a public art policy is going to be part of that. So in sort of cleaning up resolutions, I think we can definitely put that in there. And that would give us then something to get off the list for Mr. Ver. Was that listed in the RFP as one of the requirements?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezel-Allen, and that is our intent, that the public art policy can help, or the cultural plan can help inform the public art policy.
Yeah, and it should be part of the,
right.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. Another item from 2015 is as well, which is the animation collection, which is at the art gallery. Quite a few of those were damaged from what I'm understanding from the damage to the gallery. And there was a request that the director of the art gallery give the status as to the collection and possession, any recommendations. So nothing's been done since 2015, and I don't know what the value of that would be. Quite often when you receive a donation in that manner, there's usually a lot of restrictions that you have to hold on to it to a certain period of time. I ran into this with a large art collection that was donated to a charity that I was involved with in Windsor, and it's still in storage 20 years later. So has there been any movement or any discussion with the art gallery in concerning the collection?
Much. It's a legacy, that's for sure. Councillor, I'll just go right to Mr. Ver here.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezo-Allen. Similarly, with that one, with the future SSM project, we are working with the art gallery at looking at undertaking an RFP for a business plan, and I think the consideration of that collection and its use and or not with the art gallery would be contemplated when they develop that new plan.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, did you have any other matters on the consent agenda?
Just the...
Go ahead.
I have one more. Just the 6.5, the RFP.
Yep.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Lamming, I think it's wonderful. I think it's a really good use of the space that's there. I'm probably there every day during the summer holidays, like summertime with my dogs. The only thing I think that I would recommend in the RFP is that you do specify days and hours. That you have, must be open a minimum of, I would say 7 days a week from noon till 5 or something like that, so that you're not getting RFPs in that will have hours all over the place, because people are there all the time. You have seniors there, you have, people with young children. So I think my only caution to you would be to add some sort of provision for required hours, so that we are covering service to the community in that space, because for $400 a month, that's a really great deal for someone. As someone who has rented retail space and office space in this community, you don't really get anything for $400 a month. So I think with giving that sort of break on the rent and getting a spot in there, I think you want to have some sort of set required minimum hours and days in that process.
Okay, anybody else in 6.5? I'm going with Councillor Scott and Councillor Dufour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Similar to what Councillor Vezo-Allen was saying, I know that I personally have had experience going downtown and being disappointed when there wasn't something open. But my question to you, Mr. Lamming, is there a potential to expand the licensed area beyond what's on the diagram? I know it's kind of on the corner, but it looks like there could be some more space. Like if it takes off, if it's successful and they need some more outdoor seating, is there potential for that? Or?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Scott, yes, what we proposed right here was an area that we had interior, immediately surrounding the area in the green. If you're looking at the yellow area, that's for special events. That's already kind of expanded right there. That was the thought process right there. But with the AGCO, you can look at expanding special permit occasions if it's for a special event, i.e. Canada Day, for those type of things to accommodate.
And just a quick follow-up question to that. Is there, I don't know this answer, is there some sort of regulation for distance from the water that we have to abide by?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Scott. Yeah, we didn't put anything right near the water. There is some regulation there, but I would have to take that offline to get the exact answer as to the distance from the actual shoreline.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Dufour.
Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Lamming, my question is also about the liquor license. It says in here that the application is in progress and can be transferred in the interim if required. Am I to understand from that the city will hold the liquor license for this property for the duration of the lease agreement?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour, that is correct. We've learned some lessons along the way of having like facilities, and if we do have a license in place, it makes the transfer process much easier if it's an establishment that comes forward that wants to sell alcohol. We do have openings here for other businesses as well that are tourism related, so it may or may not be the case, but we wanted to make sure, given the time frame is a quick turnaround May 1st, that we had a license in place which would expedite the process.
Okay, so just a follow-up question. If an RFP was accepted by an operator and they did want to sell alcohol, they would then have to sell alcohol under the transferred license under their own business, or would they still sell alcohol under the city's license?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour, what happens in that process is that they would have their own applications submitted, and in the interim, we would allow them to use the city license.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anybody else on 6.5? Seeing none, Councillor Gardy, you had a matter on consent.
I think I might have addressed it, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Anybody else with matters on consent? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk.
Motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Gardy, resolved that all items listed under date 2019-0114, agenda item 6, consent agenda and addendum be approved as recommended.
All in favor? Carried.
Council, this brings us to the board and committee section of the agenda, 7.8. As noted to you in an email, what we will do first is go through and complete the slates for those committees in which there are more councillors interested than there are positions. Once we have finished that, we will then fill the I believe there's about 3 committees that don't have enough interested people right now as council members, and we'll need to fill those. And then we will approve the whole appointment process with one motion. Especially for the new council and for the returning councillors, just as a reminder on process, you all have a pad of paper with you and a pen. We do the voting for these positions by what's called simultaneous recorded voting. When we get to a committee that, let's say, has 3 positions and maybe 5 members of council interested in it, you will all vote, even if your name is one of the ones standing for a position. What you will do in that instance is fill out 3 names from the 5 that you wish to vote for. You'll write those down on a piece of paper and put your name at the top. They will be collected by the deputy city clerk, brought up to me, and then I will read them all out. At the end of reading them out, we will see which members will have a vote total of 6 or more. Anyone who has a vote total of 6 or more is appointed. Anyone who, if we haven't filled all the positions by that time, the lowest vote getter will fall off the ballot, and we'll do another round until we have all the positions filled. Then we'll move to the next committee that requires spots to be selected by vote. Are there any questions on that part of the process? Okay, our first committee that requires runoff voting is 7.8.1.6, Conferences and Major Special Events Funding Committee. Just one other item, Council, I forgot to mention it. Councillor Scott has notified me that he is removing his name from consideration for the Police Services Board and also on the Algoma District Municipal Association. He is willing to serve as the alternate on that committee. So Councillors Bruni and Nero will be the main members on that committee, so we won't require any voting for that particular one. For the Conferences and Major Special Events Funding Committee, 4 members of council are required. The following councillors have indicated their interest. Councillors Bruni, Hilsinger, Nero, Scott, and Vezo Allen. So would you please vote for 4 of that list of 5 names? Put your own name at the top. And once completed, give it to the Deputy City Clerk.
You'd screw up the totals if you didn't. You'd screw up the totals if you didn't.
Okay, Council, the results of this vote are as follows. Councillor Bruni is voted for Councillor Bruni, Councillor Nero, Councillor Scott, and Councillor Vezo Allen. Councillor Hollingsworth is voted for Councillor Bruni, Councillor Hilsinger, Councillor Nero, and Councillor Vezo Allen. Councillor Gardy has voted for Councillors Bruni, Hilsinger, Nero, and Scott. Councillor Vezo Allen has voted for Councillors Vezo Allen, Scott, Hilsinger, and Nero. Councillor Scott has voted for Councillor Scott, Vezo Allen, Bruni, and Hilsinger. Councillor Hilsinger has voted for Councillor Hilsinger, Vezo Allen, Nero, and Scott. Councillor Dufour has voted for Councillors Hilsinger, Nero, Scott, and Vezo Allen. Councillor Nero has voted for Councillors Bruni, Hilsinger, Nero, and Vezo Allen. Councillor Christian has voted for Councillors Hilsinger, Bruni, Vezo Allen, and Nero. Councillor Shoemaker has voted for Councillors Nero, Vezo Allen, Scott, and Hilsinger. And Mayor Provenzano has voted for Councillors Bruni, Hilsinger, Nero, and Scott.
Were you looking at me to record all that? Because she was doing it.
We did build in a redundancy, Mr. Mayor.
He looked to me right after it was done, and I didn't realize that was part of my job here, but I will record the next one. What do we have on that, Deputy Clerk?
Councillor Hilsinger, 10. Councillor Nero, 10. Councillor Vezo-Allen, 9. Councillor Scott, 8. And Councillor Bruni, 7. So it will be Councillors Nero, Hilsinger, Vezo-Allen, I'm sorry, and Bruni. Councillor Scott had 8.
You said Bruni at 7.
Is that, sorry. Yes, it is a 7. My apologies. So the 4 that will be on this committee are Councillors Hilsinger, Nero, Vezo-Allen, and Scott. Our next committee is the Downtown Association. For the Downtown Association, there's 1 position available, and Councillors Hollingsworth and Vezo-Allen have indicated the interest in this position. Councillor Hollingsworth? Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. I'll withdraw since Councillor Vezo-Allen is the Ward 2.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth.
Our next committee to deal with then is the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee can have 3 or 5 members of council, as well as the 2 citizens. Councillors Bruni, Dufour, Hilsinger, Hollingsworth, Nero, and Vezo-Allen have indicated an interest in serving on the committee. You could
3 to 5. You can pick 3, you can pick 5. You can pick up to 5. I'm going to pick 5. I don't know why we all just wouldn't agree to pick 5 and vote on 5, but
I would suggest to you, Council, that you are choosing 5 out of the 6 on this. Councillor Shoemaker? Councillor Shoemaker?
Councillor Shoemaker's mic,
thank
please.
you. Yeah, we got it. If my recollection of the terms of whatever you call it, the
references.
Terms of reference. Yeah, that's the word. Is that if it's 5 members of council, it's 3 members of the public, and if it's 3 members of council, it's 2 members of the public? No? Am I wrong on that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, I did check the terms of reference today just to make sure, and the number of citizens doesn't relate in what I have as the terms of reference for it. I believe they were looking to have an odd number of councillors either way. Gotcha. So that's why the proviso for 3 or 5.
Good, because I wasn't going to vote.
Okay, thank you.
So Councillor Nero's looking for his mic here. I think he's going to spare us a vote. So thank you, Councillor Nero, if that's the case.
Yeah, I'm going to spare you the vote, seeing as that I was successful in that one, and the clerk announced that ADMA was settled, and I was on that one. So I will remove my name off Finance Committee.
Perfect. Thank you. That's settled.
Our next one, Council, is the Municipal Heritage Committee, 1 member of City Council, and we have Councillors Hollingsworth and Scott have indicated their interest. So you will be voting for 1 of either Councillors Hollingsworth or Councillor Scott. Council, for this round of voting, Councillor Bruni votes for Councillor Scott. Councillor Shoemaker votes for Councillor Hollingsworth. Councillor Hollingsworth votes for Councillor Hollingsworth. Councillor Gardy votes for Councillor Scott. Councillor Vezo-Allen votes for Councillor Scott. Councillor Scott votes for Councillor Scott. Councillor Hilsinger votes for Councillor Scott. Councillor Dufour votes for Councillor Scott. Councillor Nero votes for Councillor Hollingsworth. Councillor Christian votes for Councillor Hollingsworth, and Mayor Provenzano votes for Councillor Hollingsworth.
6 votes for Councillor Scott, 5 votes for Councillor Hollingsworth. Do you have the same thing? 6-5? So Councillor Scott.
Council, that brings us to the DSAB. For the District Social Services Administration Board, previously we have had 6 members of City Council. We are requesting to fill this with 5 members at this time. Due to the change in council composition, if we had kept it at 6 members, we would have a quorum of City Council at a DSAB meeting, which would prove problematic. We have requested the ministry for a change in the regulations that sets out the composition for the DSAB. We have recent correspondence from them that they are looking favorably at that change and will officially change the composition. So at this time, we are looking at just appointing 5 members. The following councillors have expressed interest in the DSAB. Councillors Bruni, Christian, Dufour, Hilsinger, Hollingsworth, Nero, Scott, and Vezo Allen. Would you please fill out a ballot selecting 5 names from that group? Councillor Scott?
You know what, I'm going to withdraw from that one, just given the other boards, so.
Okay, Councillor Scott has withdrawn his name from consideration.
Councillor Hilsinger?
I'll withdraw my name.
Councillor Hilsinger has withdrawn her name from consideration. So just to reiterate, that's Councillors Bruni, Christian, Dufour, Hollingsworth, Nero, and Vezo Allen. Please vote for 5 from that group. And just a note,
Hold on. Yeah, so Councillor Vezo Allen, you were drawing your name from
I'll
that?
withdraw my name.
Councillor Vezo Allen has withdrawn her name, which leaves 5 members of council. So Councillors Bruni, Christian, Dufour, Hollingsworth, and Nero will be appointed to the DSAB. Our final one for voting is the Police Services Board. For the Police Services Board, for 1 position, I have Councillors Bruni, Hilsinger, and Vezo Allen interested in serving on the board. So would you please fill out a ballot selecting 1 of those names? Council, for this position, Councillor Bruni votes for Councillor Bruni.
So PSB.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Shoemaker votes for Councillor Bruni. Councillor Hollingsworth votes for Councillor Bruni. Councillor Gardy votes for Councillor Vezo Allen. Councillor Vezo Allen votes for Councillor Vezo Allen. Councillor Scott votes for Councillor Vezo Allen. Councillor Hilsinger votes for Councillor Hilsinger. Councillor Dufour votes for Councillor Vezo Allen. Councillor Nero votes for Councillor Bruni. Councillor Christian votes for Councillor Bruni. And Mayor Provenzano votes for Councillor Vezo Allen.
So it's 5 votes for Councillor Bruni, 1 vote for Councillor Hilsinger, 5 votes for Councillor Vezo Allen.
Council will then have a runoff vote between Councillors Bruni and Councillors Vezo Allen. Would you please choose one of those? For this round of voting, Councillor Bruni votes for Councillor Bruni. Councillor Shoemaker votes for Councillor Bruni. Councillor Hollingsworth votes for Councillor Veso-Allen. Councillor Gardy votes for Councillor Veso-Allen. Councillor Veso-Allen votes for Councillor Veso-Allen. Councillor Scott votes for Councillor Veso-Allen. Councillor Christian votes for Councillor Bruni. Councillor Nero votes for Councillor Bruni. Councillor Dufour votes for Councillor Veso-Allen. Councillor Hilsinger, I haven't called out yet, right? Yes, votes for Councillor Veso-Allen. And Mayor Provenzano votes for Councillor Veso-Allen. Okay. Council, that fills the committees that required voting. We still have vacancies on 3 committees. Christmas Lighting Awards still has spots for 2 councillors. So Councillor Gardy has indicated his interest. I have 1 other member of council interested in.
Do we take a bus on that, eh? I'll sign up for that. I've never done it. Can I bring my little ones? That's no problem. I can bring my little ones though. Okay.
Council, the next one is the Conservation Authority. We do require 2 additional members of council for the Conservation Authority.
Important that we fill this out. So we require 2 additional members of council for the Conservation Authority.
This time we have Councillors Bruni and Gardy.
So we need 2 additional members of council? Nope. What happens if there's a vacancy, Mr. Clerk?
I believe Councillor Hollingsworth is.
Are you?
Hilsinger, my apologies.
Thank you, Councillor Hilsinger. So that's 1.
The answer to the question through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero is council does have the option of appointing citizens to this particular committee in the place of council representation. Should council be unwilling to fill a complete slate of council, then that would mean we would have to advertise for interested applicants from the citizenry, and then you would
Councillor Nero, I think you're interested.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I believe we budget $540-some thousand to Conservation Authority, and we should have 4 members of council on it, if that's what. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Nero. That Conservation Authority is filled.
And our final one is one of our ad hoc committees, the Noise Bylaw Review Committee. For that one, I would note to council, we have 3 councillors on it. We had 4, however, the world will not end if we only have 3 councillors on it. There's not a statutory need to have 4 councillors.
We don't require the 4th spot. So if none of you are interested in taking it, we can move ahead with the 3 that we have. I think that's the case. You know I was going to try and get you to do it, Councillor Shoemaker. Okay, I think that's it, Mr. Clerk.
Okay. If we just...
So let the clerk organize himself here.
Just have 1 second. I'm just getting to the resolution that we have. And that is a resolution by Councillors Hollingsworth and Scott, resolved that all items under item 7.8, board and committee appointments, be approved as recommended.
All in favor? Carried.
Council, that brings us to section 8 of the agenda. Our first motion is surface flooding, a motion by Councillors Bruni and Nero. Whereas on October 11th, 2018, a major flooding occurred for the 2nd time in 5 years in the following areas: Hillside Drive, Elliott Road, Hill Street, Johnson Avenue, Diane Street, Posabon Crescent, and Peoples Road. And whereas residents in this area have incurred major insurance costs to recover from the flooding damage, Now therefore be it resolved that Public Works and Engineering Services be requested to conduct an environmental assessment to determine a course of action to address surface flooding issues in the People's Road drainage area.
Councillor Bruni, would you like to speak to that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the fall of 2013, major flooding occurred in this area that Mr. White has mentioned: Hillside, Elliott Road, Hill Street, Johnson Avenue, Diane, Posabon Crescent, and People's Road. And again, on October 11th, 2018, another flooding occurred, and many of these same residents received their second flooding. Councillor Nero and I met with the residents. We listened to their concerns, which were the insurance claims and affordability to repair the damage if they didn't have insurance. Also, Councillor Nero and myself met with PWT and Engineering Department, and we all agreed the infrastructure in this area is weak and it is deteriorating. So it was agreed upon with Engineering and PWT to conduct an environmental assessment to determine a course of action to address this surface flooding in this area. And I just have one question, and if I can pass it on to Mr. Elliott. What's the time frame for this, Mr. Elliott, to get this completed?
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, environmental assessments are very difficult to predict from a time standpoint. Some of them take a year or two. So I would say an environmental assessment of this nature would probably, I'd estimate at least a year.
Yeah, I don't think the residents can wait longer than a year to get this assessment done. They've been affected twice now for flooding, and come springtime, I'm just worried that it's going to, the third flooding for these residents will occur. So is there any way of speeding up the process?
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, no, the environmental assessment process is sort of an open-ended thing. We don't know how long it will take. And after the environmental assessment is completed, if there are capital works projects that need to be recommended, then they have to be blended into the capital plan also. So it's not just a matter of completing the assessment, it's a matter of planning and engineering and actually constructing the works, if any.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Nero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just briefly, yeah, this, we need to get this done as soon as possible, but and I do realize it is a big project. And I want to take the opportunity to thank Public Works for the actions they've taken to date on looking at this area and trying to mitigate future flooding. And we have a commitment from Public Works that they've got their eye on this area, and if we see storms coming, that there's some actions that can be taken in the interim until we get this thing resolved. Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak to that motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Oh, sorry, Mr. Scott, Councillor Scott, were you looking to speak to the motion? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to put my support behind this. I know that there are north of 4th Line, there are residents on People's Road that are part of Ward 5, and I've heard the same concern, especially with the recent flooding. So I just wanted to commend you guys for putting this forward and know that I'm absolutely 100% behind this, as well as the residents of Ward 5 in that area.
Thank you. Councillor. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Nero, just to bring up, as you had mentioned, some of the stuff that we've been doing, it should be said, because you had asked us to go forward with this, that whole area has been flushed and cleaned, so there are no restrictions, the pipes are clear. We've done as much cleanup in the area as we can to try and fend off any flooding, depending on, again, the size of the storm. So that has been done. So I know this was part of keeping you up to date. I'm letting you know that's been completed.
Thank you. All in favor? Motion is carried.
Under agenda item 8.2, dog park, motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Hilsinger. Whereas according to Ipsos Reid, approximately 35% of Canadian households have a dog, community parks and recreation departments are becoming more likely to include dog parks in their building healthy community plans. And whereas dog parks can act as a gathering spot for pet parents, While their tents are plain, community members are more likely to participate in conversation and exchange community information such as upcoming events, concerns, and ideas. And whereas leash laws continue to become increasingly restrictive, communities are seeking dog parks as a way to let dogs run free without penalty to pet owners or damage to private property. Dog parks also promote safety for pets, owners, and community members. And whereas canine parks allow dogs to get ample off-leash exercise and social activity, and whereas the City of Sault Ste. Marie has only one dog park located beside the Humane Society, which is actively used, and whereas the creation and sustainability of the dog park can be achieved economically through sponsorship and pet licenses, now therefore be it resolved that city staff be requested to research the feasibility of creating 2 additional dog parks, one in the east end, preferably in Bellevue Park, and the other in the west end where dog owners can easily access them, incorporating trends from highly rated dog parks such as Vancouver's.
Okay, Councillor Hollingsworth, this is your motion. Would you speak to it?
Thank you. I just want to basically reiterate that this fits into our future Sault Ste. Marie plan because it's the quality of life and it dabbles into the social side. And the other reason that I was bringing this to the table is that when I was knocking on doors during my campaign, a number of people did bring to my attention they would like to see us to consider another dog park. And the other reason is when I was speaking to constituents is that a number of people are saying that there are some dogs on Topsail Island. And yes.
Lots of dogs on Topsail Island.
Lots of dogs. And bottom line is it's wonderful that our community has a healthy population of dogs, but maybe there is something else that we can do for our community around dog parks.
And you're correct to point out that Topsail Island is not a dog park, notwithstanding that people bring their dogs there to run free. And they shouldn't because it's against the bylaw, but they do. Anybody, would you like to speak to this motion, Councilor Hirstu?
I think it speaks for itself. Thank you.
Okay. All in favor? Motion is carried.
Under agenda item 8.3, Economic Development Fund, a motion by Councilors Hollingsworth and Christian. Whereas the overarching goal in economic development is to improve the economic well-being of the community through policies and initiatives that will increase the municipal tax base, foster business and job creation, focus on the retention and expansion of business, promote investment and diversify an economy, and whereas the City of Sault Ste. Marie has an existing economic development fund, EDF, which was established on July 12, 2018, focused on satisfying overarching goals listed above. And whereas City Council annually establishes funding support for the EDF, and as this fund is limited, City Council must be very selective in how it is dispersed to ensure the maximum return on investment is achieved. And whereas the existing policy clearly outlines key performance targets such as net job creation, attraction of new employees, and so forth. Now therefore be it resolved that a report be provided to City Council in June and December of each year, providing valuable information regarding the effectiveness of the EDF and summarizing the return on investment, if any. The report should include legal name of company, number of employees at startup versus currently, average salary, sector type of business, type of product or service created, does the business continue to exist and growing, revenue growth in the past 1 year, 2 years, and 3 years, location of head office to ensure accountability to City Council.
So before we debate this motion, Council, I did want to bring to your attention that something that the mover and the seconder didn't know at the time of drafting this motion, is that Mr. Vera and his department are currently working through the outlines of the EDF. As you're aware, the Tourism Sault Ste. Marie manages on behalf of the city. In our restructuring, we've taken that fund, and one of the things internally that we've determined is there needs to be more accountability to council and reporting to council. Mr. Vere's in the process of essentially rewriting the criteria to the fund, and he's done a draft of that, And that includes like the accountability and the reporting requirements. So I would suggest that probably the most appropriate thing to do with this motion would be to defer it to when he brings back that report, which is not going to be too far from now, because I know he's done a draft of it, and that's circulating amongst staff for their comment. So he's going to be in a position in the very near term to bring you back his report on what, how that fund should be administered. And this will be relevant to that, and if you don't think it meets the standard at that time, then I think this would be appropriate to vote on at that time.
My secondary agrees. I think that's fair.
Sure, no problem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree. This has been an issue going back for me for several years. So if Mr. Ver and his group is working on something like this, that's tremendous. And
they are.
We look forward to the opportunity that when it comes back, we get to discuss it and perhaps offer suggestions. That'd be great.
Did you want to offer any comment at this point, Mr. Ver?
No, Mr. Mayor, I think we'll save it when we bring back the report.
Okay. Do you have an idea of when council will be able to see that report?
We should be able to bring that report back, I would say, the meeting in March. There's one meeting in March.
Is that comfortable to the mover and seconder?
Yeah.
So, Mr. Clerk, if we could defer this motion to the meeting in March, so it comes at the same time as Mr. Ver's report? Good.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we'll note that as postponed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Under agenda item 8.4, Smart Industrial and Business Park Investment. Motion by Councilors Hollingsworth and Christian. Whereas municipal infrastructure investments are critical to economic development and sustainability, and whereas a considerable number of municipalities, nationally and globally, are investing in smart industrial and business parks to ensure the ready availability of serviced land, which includes high-speed broadband and public transit for employees for new businesses. And whereas having an established smart industrial and business park would attract millions in investment, providing economic growth and access to the community. And whereas the City of Brighton, Ontario has an existing smart industrial and business park, including an interactive website which provides prospective businesses to quickly and easily identify if the community meets their needs. And whereas the City of Cambridge, Ontario is building a new 160-hectare smart industrial park for new advanced manufacturing and other technology-based companies, which will offer supply chain opportunities and e-commerce. And whereas not only will this benefit potential new businesses, but existing companies that require smart services. And whereas a city that has an existing competitive industrial and business park will more likely attract companies to locate to a city that is ready to receive new migration versus a city that is not prepared. And whereas the Sault Ste. Marie Economic Development Corporation has already identified that investment-ready lands are critical to attract new opportunities. And whereas the City of Sault Ste. Marie lacks a smart industrial and business park, which is a limiting factor in attracting entrepreneurs into the community, now therefore be it resolved that city staff, a city councilor, and Economic Development Corporation staff be requested to investigate and report to council by July 2019 regarding the creation of a sustainable smart industrial and business park, including best practices, required financial investment, potential locations, and required infrastructure.
Councillor Hollingsworth, this is your motion also. Would you like to speak to it?
I'm feeling like I'm Councillor Shoemaker all of a sudden.
There's only one Councillor Shoemaker, Councillor
That's true. I think the motion really outlines exactly why Councillor Christian and I are interested in moving this forward. And I think Mr. Ver was mentioning earlier today that this seems to fit our plan as we move forward in building a future for this community. But again, I believe in looking at the future. It's basically forward-thinking, not, because there's a lot of communities right now in Canada that already have smart industrial parks, business parks, so I just don't want to get further behind the 8 ball. So again, it really fits into our future Sault Ste. Marie plan, especially the pillar that mentions economic growth and diversity. Just to give you some more events, smart industrial parks that are out there nationally, or I should say globally, is the Optics Valley, which is in China. Of course, that is top-notch. I'm not suggesting we go that far, but we can learn from what they've done. And also what Cambridge has done, and other communities I mentioned in the motion. So I ask for your support.
Okay. Would you, the seconder, like to speak to that resolution?
Offer a gift to council, and I won't speak.
Gift is appreciated. All in favor? The motion is carried.
Under agenda item 8.5, Allen Side Road, Wallace Terrace, truck traffic. Motion by Councilors Gardy and Scott. Whereas Allen Side Road and Wallace Terrace have both increasingly become busier commercial and industrial corridors with heavy truck traffic traveling by way of both Allen Side Road and Wallace Terrace to a number of commercial operators located off Allen Side Road on Base Line and 8th Avenue. And whereas Allen Side Road and the westerly portion of Wallace Terrace have not been upgraded or improved in a number of years. And whereas Wallace Terrace decreases from 4 to 2 lanes west of Roll Avenue. And whereas heavy truck traffic is having a negative effect on residences on both Allen Side Road and Wallace Terrace, and homeowners are concerned that the speed and weight of the vehicles is affecting their homes. And whereas homeowners are concerned that the speed of heavy truck traffic presents a safety concern. And whereas the neighbors appreciate and understand the importance of commercial and industrial operations and do not want to deter said operations, now therefore be it resolved that council requests that staff report regarding potential solutions, specifically including but not limited to any recommendations related to posted speed limits and reductions thereof that might be implemented to address the concerns of the taxpayers who live on both Allen Side Road and the westerly portion of Wallace Terrace.
Councillor Gardy.
Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. During the last campaign, the issue that I heard about most consistently in the west end of the community in Ward 5 was truck traffic. It was a primary concern, especially for residents on Gooley Avenue, just south of Second Line. People on Second Line west of Gooley Avenue, on Wallace Terrace and on Allen Side Road. And this, in discussion with Mr. Scott, my colleague, we thought we'd put forward as a start to addressing some of these concerns, to let everyone know that we are listening to them. A couple of people asked me while I was going door to door to stay in their house while trucks drove by, and I did that, and they rattled and shook, and some other people took me down their basement and showed me damage that over the years has gotten worse and worse. So I submit this motion and hope that council will support it. Thank you.
Councillor Scott, would you like to speak to it also?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like Councillor Gardy, I too was standing in homes during the campaign, watching that these trucks go by and they shake the house. I live further west than the area, so I do see that these trucks are constantly driving down there. That's a route that I take quite frequently. They're not going the speed limit, I can tell that for sure. So I do empathize with these concerns, and I think that it's a good first step because I've heard it a lot in the area. And I thank Councillor Gardy for putting this forward.
Any other councillors want to speak to the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion's carried.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, that brings us to bylaws. I have 3 bylaws that I need to read separately, and 2 of them, Mr. Mayor, you have a conflict with. So if we can ask Councillor Christian to...
Councillor Christian.
And Chair. Apologize, I just discovered my mic was off. Councillor Christian is serving as acting mayor for the bylaws that we need to read separately. Bylaw item number, apologize for a second, 11.1.4. It's bylaw 2019.4, the amending bylaw that needs to be corrected for 11 White Oak Drive. I have a motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Gardy, resolve that bylaw 2019-4 being a bylaw to amend Sault Ste. Marie zoning bylaws 2005-150 and 2005-151 concerning lands located at 11 White Oak Drive East, 1022-38-6 Ontario Incorporated, CO Casey Davio, be passed in open council this 14th day of January 2019.
Council, all in favor? Carried.
We have 11.1.10, which is bylaw 2019-10. Motion by Councilors Hollingsworth and Gardy, resolve that bylaw 2019-10 being a bylaw to deem not registered for purposes of subdivision control certain lots in the Sault Ste. Marie Park subdivision pursuant to section 54 of the Planning Act be passed in open council this 14th day of January 2019.
All in favor?
And bylaw 2019-13, putting 289 Bay Street stairs. Motion by this one is a conflict by Councillor Shoemaker.
Noted.
Motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Gardy, resolve that bylaw 2019-13 being a bylaw to authorize the execution of the agreement between the city and 2547742 Ontario Inc. for a staircase occupying city property abutting 289 Bay Street be passed in open council this 14th day of January 2019.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Gardy, resolve that all bylaws under item 11 of the agenda under date 2019-01-14 be approved, save and accept the three bylaws that we've just read.
All in favor? Carried.
Motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Gardy, resolve that this council now proceed into closed session regarding an item concerning labor relations. And further be it resolved that should said closed session be adjourned, that council may reconvene in closed session to continue to discuss the same matter without the need for a further authorizing resolution.
All in favor? Carried.
And a motion by Councillors Christian and Scott, resolved that this council shall now adjourn.
All in favor? Carried. You know what? So when I'm not connected to this thing,